The world was never ready for the monster that hid behind the charming, well-dressed persona of Theodore Crane. A quiet suburban neighborhood in a small Midwestern town was no stranger to oddities. But nothing could prepare its residents for the horrors that were about to unfold. Theodore Crane, a 47-year-old businessman and community volunteer, was seen as a pillar of the community, a man who always greeted his neighbors with a smile and lent a helping hand. But behind those smiles lay a monstrous secret. A secret that when finally revealed would send shock waves through the town and unravel the lives of everyone who thought they knew him. Don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. It began on a cold November night when the authorities received a call that would ignite an investigation that would ultimately expose one of the most horrific serial killing sprees in the country. Theodore had been acting strangely, his once amicable demeanor now twisted into something sinister. His wife, Evelyn Crane, had grown concerned, noticing Theodore's strange behavior, his inability to sleep, and his cryptic mutterings in the dead of night. But what she didn't know was that Theodore's dark secret had been festering for years, waiting to surface in the most disturbing of ways. Theodore Crane wasn't just a businessman. He wasn't just a quiet member of the community. Theodore was a killer, a master manipulator, a man whose charm was as much a weapon as the knife he kept hidden in his bedroom drawer. Born in a troubled family in the backwoods of Missouri, Theodore was raised by a violent and abusive father. A man whose twisted sense of discipline shaped Theodore into the monster he would eventually become. Growing up, Theodore learned to mask his true nature, hiding his violent tendencies behind the mask of a well-educated and respectable man. To everyone who knew him, Theodore Crane was the perfect husband, the model citizen. He was charming, successful, and well-liked, all while secretly harboring the most gruesome of desires. Over the years, he had already committed numerous unspeakable acts. His dark impulses fed by a craving for power and control. Theodore had groomed his victims, luring them with promises of opportunity, false pretenses, and kindness, only to slowly strip them of their freedom. The thrill of the kill, the rush of power, was something he couldn't shake. But for Theodore there was something even more sinister at play. A thirst for vengeance, one that connected him to his dark family history. It wasn't until the night of his final confession, when Theodore was forced to come face to face with the very family he had once tried to destroy, that the full extent of his crimes would be exposed. "I've always been good at pretending," Theodore admitted, his voice eerily calm as he sat across from the detective who had been assigned to his case. But eventually, pretending gets hard. The lies, they become too big to hold up. And one by one they started to unravel. The detective leaned forward, his pen poised to capture every word, every chilling detail. "Tell me everything, Theodore. We know it's you. The bodies, those poor souls. You're the one who killed them. But we need to know why. Why did you do it?" Theodore stared into the detective's eyes, his expression blank, but his lips curling into a small grin. "I wanted to break free," he said, his words deliberate. "From everything. My past, my family, the lies I grew up with. But it wasn't enough just to kill them. I needed to make them suffer first, to feel the same helplessness my father made me feel, to break them, to make them fear me." Don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. As Theodore continued his confession, the detective began to understand the true nature of the crimes. Theodore's murders weren't random. They weren't about money or revenge. They were about legacy. For years, Theodore had been haunted by the trauma of his childhood. A trauma that had been passed down through generations. His family history was stained with violence, twisted desires, and a deep-seated need for control over others. His father, a man whose cruelty had shaped Theodore's darkest inclinations, had been involved in a string of similar murders decades earlier. But when Theodore's father had been caught and imprisoned, the family's reputation had been destroyed, and the legacy of violence had been buried. Or so they thought. Theodore's twisted need for revenge, mixed with the trauma of his father's legacy, had fueled his violent spree. He had chosen his victims carefully, young men, vulnerable, alone, and he had made them suffer in the most painful of ways. But as his confession continued, a new revelation surfaced, one that would leave the detective in shock. "The truth is," Theodore said, his voice lowering to a whisper, "I've never been alone. There's always been someone guiding me, someone who understands what I'm doing, someone who's been watching me." The detective's heart raced. "Who?" he asked, his voice shaky with disbelief. "My father's legacy isn't just a memory. It's a force. A force that lives inside me," Theodore replied, his eyes wide with fanaticism. "It's not just me anymore. There's more coming. and soon everyone will know. The confession had been chilling enough, but just as the detective was about to ask more, Theodore's smirk faded into something darker, a look of pure malice. He suddenly leaned forward, his face inches from the detective's. "You don't understand," he growled, his voice dripping with venom. "I've only just begun." Suddenly the room fell silent. The detective could feel the weight of Theodore's words sinking into his bones. The dark legacy was far from over. Theodore's confession was just the beginning, and the truth about the blood-soaked history of the Crane family was about to unfold in ways no one could have imagined. As the detective was escorted through the room, his mind raced with the horrifying implications. Who else was involved? What had Theodore meant by "there's more coming"? And most chilling of all, was Theodore the last in a long line of killers, or was this just the start of a terrifying new chapter? The detective knew one thing for sure. The case was far from closed. The case had spiraled out of control. Detective Adrian Holt had spent sleepless nights poring over Theodore Crane's confessions, his words echoing in Hull's mind like a nightmare that wouldn't end. But the more Hull dug, the more the case seemed to entangle itself in something far darker than he'd anticipated. Theodore's confession had been just the tip of the iceberg, and Hull knew that with every step forward, the shadows of the Crane family's past were pulling him deeper into a web of deceit, power, and a thirst for vengeance that seemed to span generations. Don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Days after the interrogation, Hulk received a disturbing lead. A hidden diary had been discovered in a forgotten attic of the Crane family home. The diary, belonging to Theodore's late father, Lawrence Crane, was filled with cryptic entries and disturbing details that hinted at the existence of a darker power, one that Theodore had inherited. The entries spoke of rituals, secret societies, and a curse that plagued the Crane family, one that had been passed down through blood for generations. The power is not just in the blood, it is in the will. You must feed the beast, one of the more chilling entries read. Hull could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as he read those words. What kind of legacy was Theodore bound to? And how deep did it go? The diary pages were yellowed with age, but the ink was still legible. The words growing increasingly paranoid as the years went on. Lawrence Crane spoke of a pact made with an ancient entity, a being that promised eternal life in exchange for loyalty and sacrifice. Holt's mind raced. Could this be the source of Theodore's monstrous tendencies? Was this what drove him to kill, to embrace the dark side of his bloodline? Holt's investigation took him to the only remaining member of the Crane family who might have known the truth, Theodore's wronged mother, Catherine Crane. She lived in a secluded cabin in the woods, a woman who had spent most of her life trying to escape the horrors of her husband's and son's dark past. Hull found her sitting alone, her face pale, her eyes hollow with the weight of years spent hiding from the truth. "I should have left him. I should have left them both," Catherine said, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Lawrence, he wasn't just a man. He was a vessel. A vessel for something much darker. I tried to protect Theodore from it, but it consumed him. I tried to stop it. I tried to burn it out of him, but I couldn't." Hulk pressed her for more details, but Catherine's mind was shattered. Her memories fragmented. She spoke in riddles, referring to Theodore's awakening and the horrific pact that had begun with his father. There was mention of a family heirloom, a strange artifact that Lawrence had kept hidden in their home. Catherine's cryptic words made it clear that Theodore's violent streak was not simply a product of a troubled childhood. It was a part of something far more sinister. "He's not the first," Catherine whispered as Hull leaned in closer. "And he won't be the last." The breakthrough came when Hull tracked down the first victim of Theodore's killing spree, a young man named Daniel West. Daniel had been a struggling artist, someone who had been drawn into Theodore's circle before disappearing without a trace. The authorities had always suspected that Daniel had been one of Theodore's earliest victims, but the connection had never been proven. Now Hull had solid proof that Daniel's death was not just a random tragedy. It was a part of the cursed legacy. Holt visited Daniel's family home, speaking to his parents who were still grappling with the loss of their son. The father, John West, had kept an unsettling piece of evidence, the last letter Daniel had sent before his disappearance. The letter spoke of a grinning man who had promised Daniel something far more than just an artistic career. "I made a terrible mistake," the letter read. "Theodore Crane has promised me everything. Fame, wealth, but there's a cost. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I think I've made a deal with something I can't escape." The grin never stops. The final sentence sent chills down Holt's spine. "He's coming for me just like he came for the others." Don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. As Hull connected the dots, something much darker began to surface. something that tied the Crane family to more than just a history of murder. Holt discovered that Theodore's curse wasn't just the result of his father's violent actions. It was the culmination of a pact made generations ago with a shadowy otherworldly force. An entity whose power had been passed down through each Crane male. A force that had slowly poisoned the family's bloodline. This dark power fueled by rage, blood, and vengeance was alive, feeding off its hosts. And now Theodore was its most recent victim, struggling to maintain control as it consumed him. As Hulk delved deeper into the history of the Crane family and the curse that haunted them, he discovered something even more terrifying. Theodore's confession had been a lie. Not a complete lie, but one that obscured the true extent of the evil forces at play. Hulk learned of a new player in this dark game. Someone who had been pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating Theodore's descent into madness. Someone who had been manipulating the Crane family for decades. This new figure, known only as the Collector, was said to be an enigmatic figure operating in the background, collecting the souls of those who were bound to the Crane family curse. Hulk's heart raced as he realized that the Collector was no mere man. He was real, and he had been watching Theodore, perhaps even guiding him towards his final monstrous act. As Hulk returned to the Crane family estate, he felt the presence of something watching him from the shadows. The wind picked up and a low voice echoed through the trees. It was Theodore's voice. "You think you know the truth?" Theodore's voice whispered, barely audible. "You have no idea what you're up against." Suddenly Hull was not alone. The air turned cold and the shadows seemed to move. A figure stepped out from behind a tree. A tall man with a dark coat, his face hidden beneath a hood. The figure stepped forward and whispered, "I've been waiting for you, detective." As the figure's eyes gleamed with malice, Holt's heart raced. He had come face to face with the Collector. Don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting an unsettling glow over the abandoned estate. The winds howled through the trees, each gust of air a whispered warning to anyone who dared to listen. The estate, once a sprawling mansion, was now little more than a decaying ruin, a place forgotten by time and by the people who once called it home. Yet in the silence of the night, it felt alive. Alive with secrets, with shadows that refused to die. Detective Hull, or rather the man who had once been Detective Hull, stood at the center of this decaying place. His eyes were glazed over, his skin pale and cold. He had crossed over, not physically but in a way that transcended death itself. Halt had been drawn to this forsaken place, lured by the promises of answers of truth. But now, as he stood within the very heart of the mystery, he realized that the truth was no longer something that could be uncovered. It was something that had to be accepted, something that existed beyond understanding. The Collector, Theodore Crane, had been a master of manipulation, a puppeteer who had pulled the strings of Hull's life from the very beginning. The clues had been there, scattered like breadcrumbs, leading Hull into a world of darkness and horror. Yet even as Holt uncovered the twisted story of the Crane family, of curses and bloodlines, he had been blind to the final truth. A truth that was only now becoming clear to him. In the distance, Hulk could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was approaching. He turned, his senses heightened by the strange energy that seemed to pulse in the air around him. The figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette against the dim light of the moon. "Detective Holt," the figure said, its voice calm, almost too calm. "You've come so far but you're too late." Holt felt the words vibrate in his chest. A strange mix of dread and fascination filling him. He had come to this place seeking answers, but now the very idea of answers seemed both irrelevant and impossible. There was something final about the figure before him, something that screamed of inevitability. "You were always meant to be the one, detective," the figure continued. "The key to unlocking the curse, to completing the bloodline's final act. But the curse was never meant to end. Not truly, not until it's had its fill." Holt's body, tensed as the truth, horrifying and incomprehensible, sank into his mind. The Collector had been nothing more than a pawn, a tool, and something much greater, something far more ancient than Hulk could have ever imagined. The curse wasn't just about a family or a bloodline. It was something far older. Something that existed long before the Cranes or the Wolves. A force that had been lurking, waiting in the shadows of time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell and leave your thoughts in the comments below. As the figure stepped forward, Holt saw it clearly for the first time. It was a man. No, not a man, but something else. His features were too sharp, too defined, his eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. There was an air of power about him, something that spoke of untold knowledge, of a darkness that had no beginning and no end. "You should have never come here," the figure said, its smile twisted with a kind of malevolent amusement. "But now that you're here, there's no going back. You've already made your choice, detective. You've already crossed the line." Holt's heart pounded in his chest, but there was no fear, only acceptance. He had known in the deepest part of his soul that this day would come. The day when the truth would be revealed, but not in the way he had hoped. The day when he would understand that some mysteries were not meant to be solved. "I've been waiting for you," the figure continued, his voice smooth and hypnotic. "Waiting for the moment when you would finally understand. It's all been part of the plan. Your investigation, the clues, the deaths, they were all part of the ritual, part of what needed to happen." Holt staggered back, his mind racing. "What are you talking about?" The figure tilted his head slightly as though amused by the question. "The collector was just the first step. The ritual needed a key. And you were always that key. Your bloodline, your history. It was never just coincidence. You were chosen, detective." "Chosen for what?" Holt's voice was horsero, the weight of the truth beginning to crush him. "To become a vessel," the figure said softly. "A vessel for something far older than you can comprehend. The curse is not just a punishment, detective. It is a bond. A bond between worlds." Holt's mind swirled with confusion and fear. But something else burned inside him. A burning desire to know the full truth. To understand the mystery that had consumed him. "Why me?" Holt asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why was I chosen?" "Because you were meant to be," the figure replied, stepping closer. "You were always meant to end this. But the ending is not what you expect. There are no happy endings in this story, detected. There is only continuation." Before Hulk could respond, the figure's hand reached out and everything around him seemed to collapse in on itself. The walls of the crumbling estate, the floor beneath him, the air, everything seemed to implode, taking him with it. The last thing Holt saw was the figure's eyes. Eyes that burned with an unholy life, eyes that seemed to promise both oblivion and eternity. And then everything went black. Months passed and the investigation into Detective Holt's disappearance went cold. The police found no trace of him, no leads, nothing to explain where he had gone. The estate was sealed off and the surrounding area was abandoned, left to rot under the weight of its dark history. But the whispers never stopped. There were rumors of strange lights in the sky, of figures seen moving through the ruins at night. Some claimed to have heard Holt's voice calling out to them from the shadows. Others spoke of strange dreams, of visions of a man with glowing eyes standing at the edge of the world. As time went on, the case was forgotten by most, swallowed by the pages of history. But for those few who still remembered, there was one question that lingered in the air, unspoken but undeniable. What had really happened to Detective Holt and what dark force had claimed him? The truth, it seemed, would never be known. And perhaps in the end it was better that way. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more true crime content. Like the video and comment below with your thoughts on the case. Your support means a lot. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thanks for watching.